All right, good morning, everybody. Welcome to the final builders call for 2024. Wow, that's exciting. So welcome everyone to the call. For those of you that might be jumping on it for the first time, we do this the first and third Tuesdays of every month. That is the cadence. And the audience for this call is anyone that is committed to growing and building an organization here within EXP. So that could start off with, hey, I want to be able to recruit some people to my sales team and start that way. Or it could be, no, I'm not interested in a sales team, but definitely want to use my influence in the community and build and grow an organization. So whether you're brand new or you've got a seasons organization or you're anywhere in between, this conversation that happens the first and third Tuesdays of the month is for you. And so anyone is welcome. As you have people that you're working with, feel free to invite them into these conversations. If it's something that you're committed to and that's important to you, my recommendation is you just put the repeating calendar invite on your calendar so you know that this is where you're going to be the first and third Tuesdays at 9 a.m. Pacific. So as we jump in, we'll always have a topic of sorts. Sometimes that topic happens 5 minutes before the top of the hour, and sometimes it happens as we're jumping on the call, and sometimes it happens, in advance, in which case you guys will receive a text message like you did today, because I'm like, oh, let's talk about this today. So that being said, though, it's always a conversation, which means that if there's specific things that are going on for you in your journey of building and growing an organization that you want to talk about today, whether that is areas that you're stuck, any role play, overcoming objections, mindset, onboarding, like best practices, retention, growth, anything associated with building and growing an organization, Claire, if you text me directly, I will add you to the text group promo. Thank you. Then those things are all topics for discussion as well. So if you have those, please go ahead and put them in the chat below, because we want to make sure that each one of you today walks away from this conversation with something that's going to be valuable and support you in moving forward and helping you grow. All right. Any questions on that before we jump in? I have not had coffee. However, I have had my workout, so I am amped up. Okay. So the topic for today is, I wanted to start off around this idea, which is definitely a mindset. I was, um, I was listening this morning after my workout on my way home to a CEO of a multi-billion-dollar organization speaking. And he said, literally, if you look at everything that there is in the universe, it is in a state of expansion, even if you look at like black holes. They're always in a state of expansion and growth. And the things that are in retraction happen in the human aspect by choice in how we think. When we come from a place of scarcity or that there's not enough, that could be in areas of, hey, that like this is prevalent in Sweden of all things, and I didn't know this until I spent a lot of time working there, but culturally they have something in the country of Sweden called anti-login. And anti-login is something that keeps everyone exactly the same. And it's this idea that you should never stand out, you should never be better than or recognized or have attention brought to you for accomplishments, because that might have someone else feel less than or small. So there is a very cultural standardization of let's just keep everybody in this same space. And it is a real thing, right? So for people that grew up in that culture or in that space with this very real thing called anti-login, when you talk about what's possible or that dream bigger, or that if one can, anyone can, and that means you can too, there is sometimes a lot for someone to overcome in between their own two ears before they will give themselves, like intellectually, they may know that because it makes sense. However, emotionally embracing it and allowing it for oneself is an entirely different conversation. And so what you see happen is, or what I've observed happening, because, oh my goodness, it's, I guess, the last 14 years, I've been there, multiple times and spent a lot of time and have a community of people there, is that they've broken free from this. And when they're stuck, about getting to the next place or the next level. It's this old conversation, this old program, this old thing that resurfaces and is like, okay, it's crazy how these things can have power. But in this topic, and so what I want you to start thinking about, because I'm going to ask for some shares in a moment, is what comes to your mind when you hear that term playing not to lose versus playing to win. And again, we're talking in the context today about building and growing people within an organization of EXP. So playing not to lose uh, versus playing to win. So what comes to your mind? And go ahead and just pop off mute and share.
Fear.
Fear. Okay. Tell me more about that.
I mean, probably goes hand in hand a little maybe with rejection, you know, not knowing enough about what I'm talking about probably backs that up. So I feel like I'm still in the very learning stages. I've been with EXP for maybe not even 6 months, and I've never recruited. I've never tried to, get anybody to be part of a team. I've been a solo girl for my whole life, and trying to reach that out. So that probably that first comes to mind. But I'm doing all the steps to get there. But it is the kind of that jumping off and not having the fear and just letting it happen organically.
I love that. And for somebody that is a do it themselves kind of gal, uh, the idea of um, the idea of having results come through anyone other than your own self is a very different way of thinking, because now you're like in some ways like maybe depending on people, or you're investing in people. And when you're investing in people now, for a lot of people, when you give your time and your energy, you don't give that without giving your heart. And so this whole idea of rejection does come into play at a very high level, which can have us be like, okay, I'm going to navigate this journey, which I love that you're super transparent about and identifying that fear piece. I don't want to experience the rejection. I don't feel like I know enough to be an expert in this space, to have the confidence and posture to go be in this conversation. However, I know that I want to move towards it. So love that. Thank you for sharing. Who else? When you hear playing not to lose versus playing to win in this context of building, what comes up for you?
Strategy. Like when I think
Okay.
of playing not to lose versus playing to win, I'm like, I have to have a plan going in. Like I have to have a good strategy to win.
I love that. So do you feel like you have a good strategy right now?
I feel like I have about 80 to 85% of the strategy, but I feel like I'm missing a piece of my puzzle on almost every good day.
Okay, so if you were to say that 15%, that gap, we're going to call it the gap right now, versus a missing, we're just going to say there's a little space. What would you say is in that 15%?
The important stuff. The part that I'm missing. Kind
Okay.
of like the 80-20 principle, like maybe I'm not focusing on the right things.
Okay. And if you were to identify what you would imagine those right things to be, what would they be?
Focusing on the strategy that I don't think I have.
Okay. So is this a strategy for expansion? Is this a strategy for conversion? Is this a strategy for initial conversation? What specific strategy do you see a gap in?
Probably the attraction, the growth piece for attraction.
Okay. Fantastic. And so in the absence of having a strategy, that is the playing not to lose piece, because it's like, oh, it's going to happen organically.
Probably not. Yeah, that's in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think it's such a great point, because a lot of times you'll hear attraction. And when we think attraction, I don't know what you guys think, but I think like, oh, something that's so compelling. And it's like when we're attracted to another person and I'm not talking like sexually, I just mean like that person, who they are. It's, oh, I like their energy, or they were so kind, or they're a great communicator, or they're very authentic, right? And we're attracted to those pieces and parts. And attraction is will grab attention, but attraction will not convert. And so in this space, we talk about attracting talent. Yes, however, we got to have a strategy to convert the talent, right? And so I love that. Thank you for sharing. Okay, who else? When you think about playing not to lose versus playing to win in this space of building and growing an organization.
Not taking chances when
Okay, and what would a
playing.
chance? Like, what's a
Well,
chance?
you're playing it safe, so you're hoping somebody else will make a mistake, like in this case, that somebody else will be in trouble or not like their broker and it should come to you. And
Oh,
then
okay.
taking chances, not calling, you're not going for the win, so you're not reaching out to people. Maybe your ego or your social media, you don't want people to know that you're a recruiter, like you're a recruiter, right? So you're playing defensively, and not going on the offensive.
Okay. So for risk of what people may think, uh, I'm gonna wait and see what comes to me. There's a very interesting thing about the wait and see what comes to me. And for those of you that may identify with that, because I know this is a conversation. I mean, I remember being in real estate. When I got in real estate in 2005, I was like, whatever comes to me is what I deserve. And it will happen. And I trust the process. And what that was actually a playing not to lose. Because it was like, yeah, I'll go do the open houses, I'll do the door knocking, whatever business is going to come to me that's the business I deserve to be doing, versus a totally different context of playing to win, which is no, what is the business I desire in our conversation today? What is the organization that I desire? What are the skills for me to develop intentionally to create that and then refine over time to play to win? Totally different conversation. However, for a lot of people, a lot of people, there are things, which is a whole conversation for another day, that get in our mind about what we actually deserve. And those conversations, I mean, oh my goodness, they can come up in the most interesting ways, right? So if you go back to your family of origin, and oh my goodness, am I going to outdo my family of origin, right? In my success and my influence and my impact. And if they feel threatened by that, or that I feel like I'm better than they are because of that, do I lose their love, their attention, their affection? Or I become that person in the family, right? This sounds like, mm, okay, Casey, like, are we having psychology 101 talk here? And no, we're not. However, in some ways, every single one of us has those, like, your childhood version of you is still very much alive in your body, and it will be with you for the rest of your life, and mine will be with me for the rest of my life. Right? So knowing that, and instead of resisting it, or wanting to push it away or not acknowledge it, go, hey, you know what, this piece could be, this piece could be very real for me. So in order, and what that might cause for me is for me to play not to lose. And in that, I keep everything in the way that it functions, because everybody's got this role, right? So this happens in teams, this happens in communities, this happens in families, right? And when someone changes their role in a team or a community or a family, it disrupts the freaking apple cart, because all of a sudden everybody else feels displaced and they don't know how to be. And so when we look at like this idea, this concept, and how this is going to play out now, I want to acknowledge every single one of you for being in this conversation and on this call today, because by being in this conversation, regardless of your family of origin, your the 5 to 6 to 7-year-old version of you that sits inside your adult body today, like, this is a confrontive conversation to be in, and every person will come up against that thing to go create and build an organization here. Because at the end of the day, what it takes is you releasing, silencing, letting go of whatever all of those conversations are, or those influences are, and then choosing a very specific set of behavior that is aligned, that's going to help you create what it is that you want to create. And, in this context, I mean, and then you create it and it will continue to come up. Like, I remember our organization had gotten to the size that it did, that in 2021, when we cashed out a chunk of stock and put the down payment on our dream home, and rev share was enough to pay for the mortgage, our daily living expenses, our life. I thought, oh my goodness, we've been working for this dream for like, 13 years, and now we're here. It's going to be so exciting. And we were actually both really depressed once we took the keys.
Wow.
And we had this conversation where like our energy was totally like kind of flat. And we've been working for it. That's what we really wanted. And so as Rick and I had a conversation about it, it was like, wow, this is so much bigger than we actually ever saw us being able to create. Yet we kept the dreaming going, and we kept the work going, and we kept doing all the things that now there was this personal development side to do, to go, you know what? We deserve every single freaking square inch of this place because of the prices that we've paid and the time and energy and money that we've invested along the way to be where we're at today. And so then it's a matter of up leveling that internal conversation to go, no, you know what? I do deserve this. And not only do I deserve it, not from a place of being entitled, but I'm going to be very grateful and happy. And this is raising the thermostat on the new normal, even though it's so far outside of what normal has ever been. Cheryl, come off mute. There's something happening great there. I want to make sure we get it.
Well, first of all, I needed this so bad, and I've got to gonna get emotional. I've got to plug myself into the right rooms because I need to hear these things. But yeah, all the things you're saying, like I've questioned this year, like why do I have this much money in my bank account? Why does this cost this much money now? It's it's becoming like I know that I'm a different person than I was a long time ago, but I don't want to stop growing either. And so I have got to get that thermostat up, which is why I've got to be in rooms like this to hear this, because it's growth and it's not pretty all the time, but sometimes it's a beautiful thing in the end.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you for being vulnerable and being willing to share that. And it is so true, because when we raise our thermostat, and particularly if a lot of the people that are meaningful to us are in a different place on their personal journey, or have different desires or different dreams, it can be, once you've raised it, of like, okay, well, I'm just going to stay in this place now, because too much further outside of this space in the context of growth, I'm going to like completely outpace the people that are some of the people that are nearest and dearest to me. And that can be that playing not to lose, like, okay, I've created the next level. How do I just maintain this next level? Uh, versus what is the next level after that? Love that. Okay, we're going to take one or two more shares in this context of, again, playing not to lose versus playing to win. What comes up for you personally as you ponder that?
I'll share. So I love this conversation. So what comes up for me is energy, intention, and its context of like the game that I'm playing. And I also think about whatever I focus on expands, and playing not to lose seems like it's scarcity, and playing to win is abundance. And one thing that keeps coming up for me lately in this happened about 10 years ago when I decided to step into leadership, and I had this big dream. One of my coaches actually told me, she said, the old version of you is going to have to die for the new version of you to be born. And I didn't, and I said, yeah. And it's like, are you really ready for that? And I said, absolutely. Sign me up for that. And sometimes people, they say, be careful what you ask for. I didn't know what I was signing up for. And there was a lot of challenges, a lot of things that I didn't imagine were going to happen, right, to become this version of me. But yeah, I just wanted to share that. And I really think that, yeah, playing a win is like, and I see this with myself, right? Whenever I get into an issue or breakdown, a problem of some sort, I could pivot to the actual breakdown, or I can just pivot immediately, like which I've done, reframe. Okay, what is this teaching me? How can I learn? How can I evolve? How can I become a greater version of me? And how can I move forward powerfully so this doesn't happen again? So looking at everything as a learning experience. So that's what comes up for me.
I love that. And what you said is, I want to highlight the grief part of the comment that you made, that the old version of you will have to die in order for the new version of you to be born. And when we think about that, like just that statement, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense, because the old version of me is going to create the old, the new version of me will create the new. Yep, I want the new. This is the direction I want to go. But the truth is, there is so much emotional attachment around the old version of you and how it got to be that way and everything that you created in that version of you. And so that idea, like, it is that survival mechanism that will kick in and go, oh no, change means death. And the survival part of your brain is there to keep you alive, even if intellectually you know that change means growth, and what will die off is the parts that no longer serve in this new iteration to keep going and moving forward. And go ahead. Yes, you
I
came
was
off.
just I was just gonna say one more thing to that idea, right? In
Yeah.
addition to just dealing with your own stuff, your environment knows the old you, right? The environment, the people, your family, your friends, like your colleague, everybody knows the old version of you. So you're not just bumping up against your own stuff. You're bumping up against everyone else, and every single person is challenging you and saying, and the thing is that, and this is what I would offer as like as advice, if I may, is don't get triggered or upset when people challenge your new version of you, because if you default to that survival once again, the scarcity again, when somebody challenges you or questions your new version, then you're defaulting back to the old you. So I think every single person, like your friends, family, they're all little messengers and really testing you to see if you're ready for this next phase, this next chapter. So understand that it's not just going to happen, just within. Like your environment is going to be a reflection of that. So hey, just be ready for that. When you're declaring, hey, this is who I am becoming, be ready for your environment to really test you. And when you're being tested, really look at it as a test and not as as a failure. It's just a test.
It is. And it's all like, I love what you said. It's all feedback, right? So like if I get triggered, it's feedback. It's feedback for me. And what is that feedback? Like, what is really happening for me in that conversation? This is similar, however, it's kind of on topic. So yesterday was my mom and dad's 52nd wedding anniversary, and they were here with their friends over the weekend. And we were sitting having a very meaningful conversation about this book, Getting the Love You Want, which is why people pick who they pick to be in relationship with. And it's based on a set of uh, where you felt most loved and familiar from a family context, and then all of the voids, the things that you perceived as voids, and you will pick a person that's a combination of those two things, and it ends up challenging you, but it's so that you can grow together ultimately, right? So we're sitting having this conversation, and I could feel like I'm watching. So my family is I am the personal development, like wanting to understand and how the world works and how to constantly be better. And I have this insatiable drive for it. And that is not the same scenario in my family of origin. And so I'm watching I'm feeling without even looking and watching my mom's body language change in this conversation. And she turns and she says, well, what do you think that you didn't get growing up that had you pick who you picked? And I'm like, oh, no, no, no. It wasn't that, that was not the conversation, right? And so, because I could sense and feel the environment changing, I knew that piece was going to be coming in the conversation. It's like, oh, mom, everything that you did was perfect because it contributed to the development of who I am today. And then we were talking about marriages and, my first marriage. And if that hadn't happened, I'm like, are you kidding me? If I hadn't married the guy that I married, I never would have met his first wife, his ex-wife. She's the reason I got into real estate. Real estate's the reason I met Rick. I wouldn't have the life I have today without that choice. So like in the context of environment, when you are somebody that is geared to wanting to grow and to wanting to expand and to wanting to be, to be better. Like I still felt like Leo, I totally identify with that. I'm like, oh gosh, like we're going to have something going on because we're in this like out in the deep waters of the ocean territory conversation. And so there's going to be an opportunity for me to show up in a way that is like completely neutral and loving, right? And so we're talking about all of these human dynamic things in the context of building an organization. Which is so funny. But Stacy and Claire were the only two people that jumped on this call the last time we had it. And so we got to have such an intimate conversation, specific and unique to them and where they're at and growing and building their organizations. And one of the things that's really important as a reference point on all of this is that if you work for another company, like Stacy used to work for Keller Williams, and her role was as a team leader to recruit. That's what she got paid to do. She knows how to recruit. Building an organization, you might think is the same here in EXP because you're recruiting agents. It is not the same thing at all. And what we talked about on that call 2 weeks ago was the differences and all of the things that come up when you're actually building something that's going to be based on your vision of what you want to create and the people that you want to be surrounded with when you do it. And this goes back to Cindy, what you were saying at the beginning about that, possible fear of rejection that comes up. And so the tendency to maybe want to play it safe because they're not rejecting EXP now, they're rejecting me personally, right? And the beauty of what we can build here is we get the vision and this aspect of resilience now that comes in when we think about playing to win, right? So I'm going to give you a real life example about this, in that Selena and I have been working with a small independent brokerage that's been an independent brokerage for over 20 years. And they have a very different model of how they do business. It's a salary-based model for their agents. And so in the due diligence process, the owners of the business fully get the benefit to them to be with EXP, right? They get all of the responsibility and liability things that EXP is going to take over. They get the ability to invest in people, have a larger footprint, and grow a national and possibly international organization, the impact that comes from that. Those pieces are very clear, and yet there was this gap, right? And this is in this conversation about playing not to lose versus playing to win. And why I'm bringing it up is because you're going to be in these conversations with small independents or brokerages or potentially even larger brokerages. And so it was what are we actually looking at here? And so they sent over a list of all of the things that their agents currently get, their value proposition, and how do we justify this move to our agents of coming to EXP because of many of the things that they offer would not be in the same way. So it looks like it's less value to the agent. And here's a really important thing when it comes to this idea of playing to win versus playing not to lose. And so they sent an email, and I very thoughtfully, there's this idea in life that you can be right or you can have what you want. And a lot of people just want to be right. And they'll not get what they want, but they will be freaking right all the time, right? So I'm very aware, because when I'm not clear on something, I'm not clear on it and I'm not positioned on it. And then when I am clear on something, look out, like the whole world needs to adjust and move because Casey's clear, right? And this is what's happening. So there's this gap that I'm constantly aware of like, okay, how do I communicate in a space to bring somebody along? And what is there for me to communicate in this context of playing to win? Without making them wrong about how they've been doing something, because they've been doing it successfully and they're a very successful brokerage, right? And what's the end result? The end result is I want to see them with us because I know what it will mean for them and ultimately for their people. So to come at this conversation and where it's not about being right and they're really looking for how they bridge this gap, I took it back, and in the conversation, in the email, I just said, here's what I would do if it was me. Not that this is what you would do, but this is what I would do if it was me. I would have all of the agents that are at the brokerage read the book Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. After reading that, have a conversation with them and they'll be able to self-identify that they are on the left-hand side of the cash flow quadrant. Just by a show of hands, who is not familiar with what I'm talking about right now? And I'll go into more detail. Cheryl, okay. So the cash flow quadrant, it talks about, it's essentially, to me, I look at it as freedom. So Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki's dad worked very hard and died poor. And then his rich dad worked hard as well, but died very wealthy. It was like he created and amassed wealth. And so there was this framework that on the left-hand side of the quadrant, you could be an employee where you trade your time for money, and you will never create wealth in that way. You could be an entrepreneur where you're still making that trade, but you have control over it. So you don't ever get time and money. You still are in this one or the other conversation. Then when you move to the right-hand side of the quadrant as a business owner, you have leverage. And so you could start to get not just money, but you also get time, which is the freedom component. But thank you, Selena. And then the last piece of that is an investor, where now you've got the money that you have working for you. So when we talked about this idea, or in, this, I'm crafting this email, I stuck this visual in there and said, once your people identify that what they are is in the top, where they're at, this will be an undeniable conversation, and they're never going to they'll work until the day that they die, and quite possibly never live the life that they want to live. And they're going to trade that for a sense of security and safety, which is playing not to lose. And so there's a contextual shift that would be required for all of them once they see this, to go, okay, how do I get free? And how I get free in the short term may look like I'm going backwards. Yes, I'm going to pay for my own health care. Yes, I'm going to have a split I don't currently have. But I'm still going to have all these people that love and care about me, investing in me and my business to help me grow any business that I want. We're going to do this over the platform of EXP, where all of these other things now become available, right? And that is a teaching people to think differently, so that they see the value in behaving differently. Because otherwise you're now looking at, this penny and this dollar spent here, which is what a lot of agents do. And when they're looking at their business, they'll go, okay, well, what were my splits and fees and caps and blah, blah, blah. And this is the cost of doing business. And it's like, well, no. When we're in a conversation about playing to win, we're in a conversation about what is the net impact of where you do your business and how you run that business. And is the net impact going to keep you on the left-hand side of that quadrant, which is where most people are? And there's no judgment if somebody wants to stay there. But from my experience, if somebody's really being honest with themselves, there's a point in time where you get sick and tired of being sick and tired. And when you recognize, Cindy, that everything rises and falls on you, and if you don't make it happen, it's not happening at all, that becomes a very hard place to be. So when we start to shift how we look at things in a perspective of playing to win, it's a different set of criteria, different set of actions, different set of behaviors, different contextual filter or frame that we look at things through. Now it's like, okay, if I'm going to create freedom and impact, and that all happens on the right-hand side of that quadrant, where do I change in my own mind? And, that now becomes the standard, right? The standard of how I operate. And once you start thinking in that way yourself, you can identify now people and meet them where they're at. And the greatest news about every single person on this call is that we all started on the left side of the quadrant. And some of us are still there in some respects, and navigating that movement, whether you maybe have had awareness that you were navigating that or working to navigate that or not. But at the end of the day, what we're really talking about is the freedom to be. So when you are playing to win, the freedom to be is the freedom to be where you want to be, when you want to be there, with the people that you choose to be with, as much or as little as you choose, without regard to limits on time or money. Without regard to limits on time or money. And that is not something that a lot of people will create in their lifetime because it requires taking on this mindset of playing to win and being willing to go through, man, they said no, and it felt like a personal rejection, even though I know intellectually it wasn't. I reached out and I created a relationship, with this person in a context of serving that I never would have done otherwise because I have a vision to create something and I don't know if they're a match for it, but we'll develop a relationship and find out if they are. And getting free requires being a servant. I'm going to say that again. Getting free requires being a servant. And it's not a matter of who wants your time, it's who deserves your time. So if you have somebody that, that wants your time, well, I have had this, Rick and I would go, we had very different perspectives on this. And, he'd be like, oh, if anyone wants my time, they can have it at any point, at any time, right? And it's why he had such a great impact that he created because it didn't matter who you were. You could have been the most successful, influential person in the world. And if you asked for his time, he was going to give it to you. And, if you could have been somebody sitting on a street corner, if you asked for his time, he was going to give it to you, and everywhere in between. And that's a beautiful thing about a person. I really, respect and admire him about that. I don't currently possess that or want to develop it. I'm like who deserves my time? Because I know for me to create the impact that I want to create in the way that it feels authentic to me, I can only do that if I help other people who want to move in their life from playing not to win to playing not to lose to playing to win. They want to create freedom. They want to create impact. Those are the kind of people that I want to give my time and energy to because I want to be able to have a conversation. I was having the conversation with someone in our organization over the last couple of weeks, and they were upset at the fact that they've been here for 2.5 years and that their revenue share that month was only $16,000. And because when they came into the organization, Brent Gove said, oh, in my first year I did this and you're way better than me, you'll be here. So they had this expectation that they're going to be at like 1,000 agents by their third year, and they're not at 1,000 agents. They're, a little over a couple hundred agents. And so, and this is an example of playing to win versus playing not to lose. I went and we had this conversation. So who wants your time versus who deserves your time? Like somebody that hungry, yes, this is somebody that I want to work with and I want to have the chance to influence, in a conversation. And so as we did that, this was and this may be a conversation that some of you need to hear right now to check yourself. And so I'm going to give it to you right now. And that is this idea about building an asset and what that really looks like. And so in this context of building an organization, and I'm pulling it up here because all I'm getting is the little spinny circles on my computer. There we go. So and I'm going to screen share it right now so that I can actually get it over to you guys so that you can see it. Or maybe I'm not. Selena, I'm going to text it to you. And then you'll be able to do that so that I can keep along my train of thought. Thank you so much. Teamwork works. Okay, perfect. So we were talking about this of like, hey, don't kick a gift horse in the mouth. And we're in a freedom conversation, right? So it's like, for somebody that says, oh, I'm only making $500, a month in revenue share. Oh, I only made $1,000 a month in revenue share. And that doesn't seem, because it doesn't cover your lifestyle and your expenses. Okay, well, let's check on what we're actually talking about. So if you go down the left-hand side of this column, which is your monthly revenue share amount, and this guy was, in between the 10 to 20,000. So let's go 10,000 just for the sake of a smaller number and easier conversation. I'm like, okay, over the last, let's even call it 3 years. Let's round up to 3 years. Over the last 3 years, after taxes, could you have saved 2.4 million based on what you make and get 5% interest on it? No. Okay, how long would it take you after taxes to save 2.4 million to get it working for you? Like right-hand side of the quadrant, right? And he was like, probably 12 years. I'm like, okay, so in less than 3 years, you've been here. building an organization that, let's just call it 10,000 a month. And that's the asset value of what you've built. Go over to $500 a month. That's an asset of 120,000. That is a big deal. Cheryl, how long would it take you? And I don't want you to answer this question. I just want you to think about it. How long would it take you to save 120,000 after taxes? How many years versus the revenue share that you receive from EXP? Thank you, Selena. So this frame that we look at things through, this reframe, like if you could tell any agent and you're in a conversation with them about playing to win in their business in 2025, how are you going to win in your business in 2025? Oh, well, last year I did 20 transactions. This year I want to do 25 transactions and I want to increase my price point. Great. Are you going to get free doing that? Well, what do you mean? What are you going to do in 2026? You're going to have to get up and do the same thing all over again, right? Which is fine if that's what you want to do. But if at some point in your life you want to be able to change that conversation, change that equation, then it's about having a different conversation and it's about looking at things differently. And I'm helping agents that want to ultimately be in a different conversation around that to create that design and that strategy in their life and business. Is that a conversation that sounds interesting to you in any way, shape, or form, or not? And the or not is, well, I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing. Okay, great. Next. Next. Not the person to sit down and beat over the head with a wet noodle and, shove the cash flow quadrant by Robert Kiyosaki down their throat when they've just said not. Like, look for the people that are looking for you and then match energy for energy. And sometimes they don't know that they're looking for you until you open up a different conversation and introduce them to a different way of thinking. So if I could show you a way over the course of this next year of doing what you're going to do anyway in your real estate business, that at the end of it, you'd have an asset outside of your commissions worth $120,000. Like 120 grand working 5% at 5% for you. Is that something that is in any way, shape, or form intriguing or not? And how would they do that? Well, that's $500 a month. That's $6,000 for the year. That's one capping agent that they would recruit and one half capping agent. And there's that asset. Is it possible to use your influence while you're out doing what you're doing anyway in real estate, now that you have it on your radar, because of the benefit to you when you do that and the benefit to them of being here and what they can create for their business and their life? Okay, this has been a lot of me talking. I'm going to pause. Comments, questions, ahas, what else is?
I've gone through at least 3 stages of grief here because when you ask the question, I'm like, I'm not fucking answering it because it makes me uncomfortable. And then when Leo was talking, I was like, oh shit. And then I someone said to me yesterday, how come you made it and this person I was in real estate school didn't make it, right? And I said, because I was hungry. Like I was desperate. I would look in my checkbook and know I couldn't cover the bills and I'd pick up the phone and I'd make the calls. And so now I'm not there, right? My goal as I sit here, I will have $2 more in my rev share check this month than my mortgage. And that was my goal, was to end this year paying my mortgage, which makes me want to throw up right now because that's playing way too small, right? It's playing way too small. And I just feel like I'm in this faux comfort spot that is an illusion to what the real dream and goal is. So there's that.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability. And I'm going to invite you to remove the judgment off of the progress that you've made in comparison to where you want to go. Because how many people can say that they have their mortgage covered and it comes from money they don't have to go out and physically create each month themselves. Not a lot of people. So that is a huge milestone. Number one, it was your intention at the time and you've hit it. You've checked the box. Great. And it's like anything when you set goals, if you don't set another one, then you're going to go backwards. So you've got this one done. Great. Now you expand your horizon onto what the next one is for you, and you step into that. The truth is there's a stewardship that goes with wealth. And when you look at people that win the lottery and why they have no money within a couple of years afterwards, it's because they are not stewards of money. They do not have a relationship or a mental or emotional or a spiritual container for that to sit. And so it doesn't matter how much you give them, they will still have nothing. The people that create and amass wealth in a financial perspective are stewards of it. They have a deep respect for it. They treat it like they would a personal relationship. There's accountability around it. There's care around it. There's intention. When I get it in, what are the things that I immediately do with it to take care of it? And it's a different way of thinking and being. And so there's a process that every single person will go through to continue to become that steward, right? A steward worthy of having something that influential, because when anything that you have, like, let's talk about money, it can be used to destroy just as much as it can be used to uplift, right? You can get somebody that's like, great, I've got whatever they've got coming in each year, and I'm going to go party now. And I'm going to pay for all my friends to go party with me. And we're all going to just go into decay together, right? Some people do that and go just live that life. That's not necessarily being a stewardship. And those people, you've seen it in professions where there's actors or athletes that go that route, and you see where they end up, right? And then you see other people that understand that there is a relationship, there's a mindset, there's an everything that goes with that grows and develops. And so as you're building and growing an organization that's going to continue to grow and build revenue share over time, that grows and develops into you becoming a greater and greater steward over what's being created, and where that's going to go. Stacy, thank you for putting your question in the chat, feeling a little bit lost about how it becomes an asset. Well, the definition of an asset is something that has financial value that a person or organization owns or benefits from. So your asset of revenue share is the fact that you have agents. The asset is in the people, right? There was no capital. You didn't buy the people. They've chosen to be in business at EXP alongside of you. And the business that they're doing, that $500 a month in revenue share, or $6,000 a year in revenue share, in order for you to get $6,000 a year, you would need to have 120 grand earning 5% somewhere to get $6,000 a year. So here you can build something. It's called build an organization and build people that will generate that leveraged income, not passive. There's nothing passive about it. It's all active income. It's leveraged because you get paid on closings that you're not physically part of the transaction. So that's where the leverage piece come from. And that's an asset. It's worth something, right? The organization is an asset. And so every person that's a beautiful thing about being here at EXP. It's an equal opportunity for everybody that's here to be able to build whatever size asset they like based on their vision and their intention. Okay. What else? Comments, questions, feedback, ahas?
The Robert Kiyosaki book was just reminded me of it. I think the story was his poor dad was actually a doctor, and his rich dad was the investor. So your mind already thinks like, oh, you're a doctor, you're rich, but he wasn't, because he was trading time for money, and just what a blessing we have to sell real estate, sell a high ticket item, and we can make as much or more alone just in the real estate industry. But with the EXP model that they came out with, and how they're continuing just to better the model. We have such a huge opportunity on top of what just selling real estate. So it kind of resets my brain to the opportunity we have to attract agents to a good company.
Love that. And the idea of poor dad being a doctor, right? Because what we're talking about is freedom, which is where you own your time and you have enough money that you can do whatever you want without having to think about when the next buck's coming in, right? Or how you're going to go get it. So it is definitely a different way of, it's like a fish out of water, right? A fish doesn't know it lives in water until you take it out. So when you start talking to people about trading their time for money or working, they're like, yeah, of course, I'm a productive member of society. Okay. Yes, because you're in the water with all the other fish. And then you go read that book and you go, oh, fish out of water. Okay. Different option, different possibility, right? Okay. Who else?
So you said if I get triggered, it's feedback. That resonated with me because about probably 3 or 4 years ago, I couldn't identify what a trigger was. Things would just irritate me and I would pop off or whatever. But I've learned the more that I can control my emotions, the more I can control my business. And some days I just have to take a step back and go, okay, breathe and really process this. But let me ask you this, and you can tell me go to therapy if you want, that's fine. But how do you take care of little Casey? How do I take care of little Cheryl so little Cheryl doesn't show up when I need big Cheryl to be working? Like, is that like something I should be incorporating into my daily schedule once a week? Like, and what do I do? Like, I take time to myself.
Yeah. So number one, little Cheryl is your greatest asset.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you look at the little Cheryl that sits inside of you, think about how uncomplicated, like really in the scheme of things, life as a little Cheryl was. Somebody else was making sure you had a food over your head or roof over your head and food in your mouth and making sure you had clothes on your back and taking care of all of, life's necessities. And so little Cheryl got to like see and process the world, all the things that developed you that you love and that you relate to. And then all the things that maybe you don't like so much that were catalysts for you to change things when Big Cheryl showed up on the scene and could make something different, right? And so I think that the piece of that is that the more connected we are to that source piece of us, and that it's not an unuseful or bad or not needed. It's like the core of where you came from is little Cheryl, right? And Big Cheryl gets to create. And as a matter of fact, this is a perfect lead into the conversation that we're going to be having on Friday on the Free Friday coaching call, which is what is the future version of you that doesn't yet today exist? And how do you get from today to that person? Because to grow into goals and dreams that haven't yet been realized or accomplished, today's version of you or of me is not going to cut it to create those things. It's going to require a future version. It's going to require change. So we're going to always take that little Casey, little Cheryl on the journey with us. They're never leaving. They're always going to be there for that voice. And sometimes the voice will be like a reminder to reset. And sometimes that voice is like, yeah, that was applicable at the time, except for I'm in a different time right now. And thank you for sharing. And that's not appropriate for where I'm going now. I'm still going to take you with me, though. Don't worry, I won't leave you behind. Right. And so it's like being able to integrate all of that, not from like just it's an asset, right? And then like anything, like don't believe everything you think. Don't believe everything you think. I'm very well aware when I'm thinking things, I'm like, well, okay, don't believe that, Casey. Right? Or, choose to think something different, right?
Hey, may I contribute something to this
Yeah,
specific topic? Thank you,
contribute.
thank you. Yeah, so I would say, Cheryl, to that, and I think Casey, everything you said was absolutely spot on. But I would recommend two things that have made a big difference for little Leo, right? I did some transformational course, which I know that there's many of them out there. The one I did was Landmark Forum. That completely changed my life. I was 25 years old and I would get triggered. I just had a ton of blind spots. So you could take 3 days, and that's what I would recommend. You don't need therapy, from my perspective. Obviously, I'm not saying nobody needs therapy. Some people do, but I would say put yourself in that or something like it. Landmark Forum was absolutely game changer for me, and I would not be able to lead and be the person I am now without having that work, like having done that work, because I would be triggered and I would be upset so many times because we deal with so many different personalities. So Landmark Forum, hands down, one of the best things I've done in my life. And number two, if you want to read a book that's absolutely powerful, that'll elevate your emotional intelligence, it's called Letting Go by David Hawkins. Letting Go by David Hawkins. And it specifically walks you through a process of basically letting go of these little trigger points, acknowledging them, and then it gives you a little exercise. So those would be the two things I would say.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and in your conversation that you've already been in, Cheryl, with Vanessa and with Rick and me, the parallel track for what Leo shared as PSI, same stuff. Yeah. All right, so let's talk next steps in the next 2 minutes. And we're going to go back to having a strategy, because Cheryl, that's one of the things that you talked about in the beginning as a, a potential gap that you identified. And then Cindy, one of the things that you identified was this idea of, not having necessarily the confidence or posture, just because there's so much that you don't know versus what there is that you do know. And both of those things come back to an asset that we have created for you, and that there'll be a couple of differences with it now that rev share has changed, because the numbers aren't necessarily the same. They're better, actually. However, the concepts and the ideas are there. And so if you go under Empire Builders Pro, under attraction and recruiting, there's a builders boot camp. And that boot camp is going to give you the strategy, and it's going to give you the system of what to do and how to do it. And the bottom line is we're here to do it together with you. So my recommendation, invitation for anyone that hasn't done that or hasn't done it all the way through, is go take the time. It's 7 30-minute videos that layer one on the other. And that's for not only to grow and build, but also to get duplication and scale and help your people that are coming in that want to do the same thing have a track to run on. So with that, this call is recorded. They're all recorded. They're housed on that same Empire Builders Pro website under resources. So you can catch the recording there if you want to go back and catch it. Thank you all for showing up to today's call and being part of the conversation. And you're all invited 9 a.m. Pacific this Friday for the last free Friday coaching call of the year, which is the future version of you in business and life, and how to get on that track going into 2025. So appreciate each and every one of you. If we don't see you on that call, have a fabulous holiday season. And here's to rocking it in 2025 and finishing 2024 strong. Appreciate you all. Bye.